Is the Quran historically reliable? This series and this episode is based on Dr. Rafat Ammari's book, Quran and History. This is Daniel Ammari from the Religion Research Institute. This episode is about Ad, the people of Ad, the tribe of Ad, in the Quran and history. In the majority of its claims, the Quran does not provide sufficient data to be evaluated historically. However, there are few instances in the Quran that have sufficient details to be compared with historical and archaeological data. The question before us is the following. Are the claims of the Quran historical? Can they be substantiated by historical documentation and various historical and archaeological records? In this episode, we will be discussing the people of Ad in the Quran. Let's go right now to the claims of the Quran about Ad. So we read in Surah 7, verse 65, and then 69 and other verses the following. And to Ad we sent their brother Hud. He said, O my people, serve Allah. And in verse 69, what do you wonder that a reminder has come to you from your Lord through a man from among you that he might warn you? And remember when he made you successor after Noah's people and increased you in height concerning physical make. Therefore remember the benefits of Allah that you may be successful. And we read in verses 73 and 74 from the same surah. And to Thamud we sent their brother Salih. He said, O my people, serve Allah. And remember when he made you successors after Ad and settled you in the land. You make mansions on its plains and hew out houses in the mountains. Remember therefore Allah's benefit and do not act corruptly in the land, making mischief. Let's analyze the verses that we have read. Hud is one of the people of Ad. Allah sent Hud to Ad to warn them. The people of Ad were the successors of Noah. They came after Noah directly. This means the people of Ad were as ancient as possibly 6000 BC. Allah made the people of Ad tall or giants, in physical stature, of course. The earliest Islamic commentators, the tafsir, state that they were as tall as 100 cubits. The people of Thamud came after Ad. They were the successor of Ad. They inherited the land after them. In other words, Ad and Thamud lived in the same location. Now we read from Surah 15, verse 80, the following. And the dwellers of Al-Hijr, Hijra, certainly rejected the messengers. And we gave them our communications, but they turned aside from them. And they hewed houses in the mountains in security, so the cry overtook them in the morning. Let's analyze this text. Where did Ad and Thamud live then? They lived in Al-Hijr, the city of Hijra. They hewed houses in the mountains. Now let's read more verses from the Quran, this time from Surah 89, verse 6. Have you not considered how your Lord dealt with Ad, the people of Iram, possessors of the lofty building, the like of which were not created in the lands? Let's analyze this text. He called them the people of Iram. They built cities with great pillars. The pillar cities were so great that there were never cities like them in all the lands. And we read from Surah 23, 28, and 31, the following verses. And when you, Noah, are firmly seated, you and those with you in the ark say, all praise is due to Allah who delivered us from unjust people. Then we raised after them the people of Noah, another generation. And we continue to read from verses 32 and 41. And so we sent among them a messenger from among them, saying, serve Allah, you have no God other than Him. Will you not then guard against evil? So the cry overtook them in justice, and we made them as rubbish, so away with unjust people. Analysis. The Quran text states that the people of Ad were one generation after Noah, so as ancient as 6000 BC. They were destroyed by a cry. We read again from Surah 46, verse 24 and 25. And so when they saw it as a cloud appearing in the sky, advancing towards their valleys, they said, this is a cloud which will give us rain. Nay, it is what you sought to hasten on, a blast of wind in which is painful punishment, destroying everything by the command of its Lord. So they became such that naught could be seen except their dwellings. Thus do we reward the guilty people. Here, when we analyze these verses, the Quran claims that these verses that Ad was destroyed by strong wind. The previous verses state that they were destroyed by a cry. The explanation is that either Muhammad narrated two versions of the stories and changed the details in each story, or the editors of the Quran that compiled the Quran compiled two different and contradictory versions of the story from those who heard it from Muhammad. Let's summarize what we heard. First, Ad was a great nation. They came into existence 1 century after Noah, as ancient as 6000 BC. They were physically giants. Some of them were ancient, as tafsir commentators. They even suggest that they were tall as 100 cubits. Ad lived in Hijra al-Hijr, northern Arabia. Hijra, or al-Hijr, is the same land that the Thamudic people inherited from Ad after Ad's destruction. That is according to the Quran. They were known as the people of Iram. They built the most significant cities with great pillars. No cities were like it in its significance in the whole land. Allah sent to them a prophet called Hud to warn them. They did not listen to him, so they were destroyed either by a mythical cry or by wind. They were replaced by Thamud, who inherited their land. Now, let us see what history tells us about Ad, whether the Quran and history are in agreement or not. Contrary to the Quran, Ad at best was a small local Arabian tribe that might have lived in the south of Jordan, northern Arabia, in the 2nd century AD, east of the Gulf of Aqaba. This is based on the work of Ptolemy. It clearly did not exist before the 2nd century AD, based on the work of Strabo, Pliny, and Agatharchides, and others, of course. Its existence was at the earliest the 2nd century AD in a very small region by the Gulf of Aqaba as a small tribe. Other scholars, such as Wellhausen, believes that Ad is a mythical nation. The word Ad is a common term referring to ancient time, according to him. Anyhow, Al-Hijr, Hijra, was a city built and indwelled by the Nabateans. Although the Quran claimed that the Hijra was the location of Ad and Thamud, the true location of Ad was to the east of Aqaba, south of Jordan, not Hijra. The most ancient information about Hijra is possibly from the Lihyanites. And then Nabateans took it from them. But Nabateans and the Lihyanites are a distinct group of people than Ad. Some scholars, such as R.B. Sargent, V.L. Reid, and F.V. Winner, identify Hud, the named prophet in the Quran, as a Jewish preacher who lived in northern Arabia about the 6th century AD. That is far cry from the claim of the Quran that Hud lived during the generation after Noah. Now, let's analyze all of that information about the Quran. No historical or archaeological support for the claim of the Quran that Ad was a significant nation made of mythical giants in the world, building the most significant city of pillars as early or as ancient as 6000 BC. Ad was dated 2nd century AD at the earliest, but Thamud dating started from the 8th century BC. That means Ad came after Thamud by thousands of years. Contrary to the Quran, how can the Quran say that Thamud came after? The Bible details exactly the major nation that came from Noah, and Ad is not one of them. Ad is not one of the ancient tribes mentioned in the Bible. The Bible also traces Aram and his children, and none of them were Ads. Now let's talk about the sources of the Quran. Where did the Quran copy the myths about Ad from? The Quran consists of several sources and mixed them with each other. Al-Tabari states that the people used to tell Muhammad stories about Ad. So basically the Quran was dependent on hearsay about local Arabian tribes called Ad of Iram. However, it mixed this local knowledge with many other myths. This confirms that Muhammad simply took the primitive Arabian stories of his time and spread them among Jahiliyyah people and put them in the Quran. Quran took its information about the tribe of Ad from primitive Jahiliyyah Arabic poets before Islam, dated it to the rise of Islam, who claimed that Ad came after Noah. The oldest of these poets is the 1st century before Islam. Poets such as Ba'du Tay', Umayyah bin Abi Salt, the cousin of Muhammad from his mother's side, and Mutammim bin Nuwaira. The premier Arabic Muslim historian Jawad Ali states the following about this. How can we trust the accuracy of those sayings which are attributed to distant time long before Islam, when Islamic writers fail to give us a correct accounting of incidents that happened within the times before Islam and during the rise of Islam? The term increased in your height concerning make or made you giants, that term that is mentioned in the Quran, suggests Manichaean literature influence on Muhammad about giants living during the time of flood. This is the idea that is found also in other Gnostic literature, and Manichaeans embraced in the 4th century AD the root of these myths that can be traced to the book of 1st Enoch, which influenced the Quran as well. The myth about the cry that destroys nation, well, in one section of the Quran claims that Ad were destroyed by a cry. The expositors of the Quran, depending on other Islamic resources, attributed this cry to the angel Gabriel. But in Surah 46, Al-Ahqaf, verses 24, the Quran claims that they were destroyed by a wind. Thus, the Quran contradicted itself. The Quran was strongly influenced by Zoroastrianism. In Zoroastrianism, all judgments are done by the god of air and by a blast shouted by the god of air or an angel. Muhammad was strongly influenced by the teaching and the myths of Zoroastrianism through Salman the Persian, priest of Zoroastrianism, who became Muhammad's companion. This is Daniel Amari from the Religion Research Institute.